Hi, welcome to Phoenix Rising. I'd like to introduce my guest today, Dr. Lynda Varlotta, who is an osteopath in Stony Brook area. And I met Dr. Varlotta 2 years ago, I guess. Some of you may know that I had a very bad case of shingles on my face and my head, and the neurologist that I went to could not help me any further, and he recommended Dr. Varlotta to help me out. Not initially with osteopathy, but with medical marijuana. And Dr. Varlotta is a medical marijuana educator, and I know she's extremely passionate about it. And my feelings about medical marijuana is it helped me tremendously, both orally and topically. I was miserable. The pain I was in was horrible. The inflammation in my head and my body it was beyond coping with. And you helped me tremendously. The first sessions we had were just Zoom because COVID was in full bloom.
Right.
And you gave me one heck of an education. And I feel it's so important. It really was amazing. It was so eye-opening because even someone of my age and my background, I had no knowledge of the differences of CBG, CBD, THC, and what's its impact, and what is this strain and that strain. And as we talked before the show was starting, people are under tremendous misconceptions about medical marijuana.
Yes.
So,
Medical marijuana cannot be perceived as recreational. And there is, when you go to a medical cannabis conference, they teach you about the different subcomponents and how each aspect of the subcomponents will play into each other, either helping or not helping. And even based on the grow, there's just so many factors.
right. So before we start into that, could you let the people know a little bit about you?
So my name is Dr. Lynda Varlotta, and I'm practicing 21 years. I live on Long Island my whole life. I have 3 dogs.
And I love them. I gotta throw them in.
I'm married, I have a daughter, and I practice an integrative medical practice. And I try to help people navigate what they are looking for in their healing path.
Right. So for me, in addition to the medical marijuana and going through the education and getting the card, you also do cranial sacral work on me. Before we go into the information about medical marijuana, could you let people know a bit about cranial sacral, which I happen to love?
Yes. So that's a very interesting history. So the first person who designed cranial sacral was a DO named Dr. Sutherland. So, but to go back even further, DO's history, where the first DO was really an MD. He found that this is before the advent of antibiotics in the early 1900s, and he realized on his own different types of body work. And he figured out how to do, he realized that the body said things or was hot or cold with different disease states. So from there in the 60s, so that was first Andrew Taylor Still. Dr. Andrew Taylor
Okay,
Still
that
was
was the
an
very
MD, and then one of his students was Dr. Sutherland. And Dr. Sutherland was a man who was very curious about the cranial bones. And he felt that there was something very interesting, even though that they were taught that the bones were fused. He had this imagination or this image of gills of a fish with her sutures, the sutures in the brain.
And the main one goes right down the center, correct?
Yes, but we have a few. So, so he saw them as gills of the fish, meaning that there's fluidity.
Okay.
So he had actually set up these gizmos with vices and baseball mitts,
Oh, wow.
and he would do certain types of holds or forces on the cranium, and then he would document what would happen.
Okay.
And so, very bizarre, very archaic, but he was a free thinker, and I
And he
love.
was following, I believe, guided information, because you know where I come from. you
Yes, absolutely. So he was doing this alone in the 1960s, and he had this thought about finding cranial motion. So he did, and then he started teaching it. So from there, so the MDs evolved into DOs,
know. Okay.
and then the DOs have a whole subset of who learn cranial.
Right. Because there are people that have a misconception when I say I go to a DO, they'll say, oh, is she like a chiropractor? And it's
Yes.
like, no, not at all.
So there is a history that's blended, and I only know from other people that study medical history. I didn't search it myself. So this is from somebody else who told me, but the first chiropractor was actually in the DO school.
Okay.
And then he split off and felt, and I may not be
Yeah, because
saying this
it's
exactly.
It's movement, but it's
It's-
applied differently.
Well, some of the basic, from what I understand, and again, I only have heard this, some of the concepts, so Andrew Taylor Still, Dr. Andrew Taylor Still, the chiropractors know about Dr. Andrew Taylor Still. And supposedly in the Chiropractic Museum are Andrew Taylor Still's notes.
Okay.
But I didn't search that out on my own, but I did hear that.
Right.
So we're all blended together, but in a slightly different way. And chiropractors will just, I don't want to say just, there are so many chiropractors that are great chiropractors and healers and do great work. So chiropractors don't do medical assessments, don't prescribe medications,
Right.
so that's the slight variation. But they can learn cranial, and they can do cranial courses through another avenue, and so our histories are blended,
Right. Yeah.
but definitely splintered.
Yeah. The chiropractor that I worked for a few of them, 3 of them, and it was very different. There's one, Dr. Steinberg, who's a darling, and he's a very good chiropractor. His nickname was Bones, which, you know, when you're thinking chiropractor, and that people would come in and say, don't crack me, don't crack my neck, or anything like that. And he always would honor their wishes and their body, and he leaned more toward gentle manipulations, which is what I find when I'm in your hands.
Yes.
There's movement, and I feel very open when I'm leaving your office.
Yes.
I feel more alert, more vibrant. It's as if somebody took, say there's a sheet of colors, beautiful bright colors, and there's like this opaque sheet over it. So after I have a session with you, it feels like that film is taken off and everything feels more open and brighter.
Yes. So when we do, we can call it manipulation, a treatment, fascial releases, musculoskeletal releases, depending on the approach that I'm using for the day,
Yeah.
then we can open up the body to have increased blood flow, venous and arterial, improve lymphatic flow, increase cerebrospinal fluid flow,
Yeah.
and just the body breathes better.
Yeah.
And we want ideal and optimal function so that the organs can function better, you can clear the body, your digestion will be better, your sleep will be improved. For everybody, it's a little bit different.
Right.
So you may come to me and say, I want this shoulder pain to go away. So then I'll give you a treatment and we try to work out the shoulder pain. But then the next time you say, well, some of the shoulder pain went away, but I really did get a much better night's sleep. Or, yes, I was having better bowel movements, or something like that. So for everybody, it can be a little bit different. May not be exactly what you came in for, but we keep on working on those issues.
Right, because everything, we all know, in and out of the medical field, everything is connected.
Everything is
So
connected.
for me, you working on the trigeminal nerve that was burned.
Yes.
However, there are times when you're on my knees, you're down by my feet, my ankles.
Yes.
You speak to me about my spine, my shoulders, because everything, I want to be balanced, homeostasis.
Yes.
So if this is out of balance, I'm sure it's not the only thing, the burn here, being out of balance.
Absolutely.
And also when you're in pain or any kind of discomfort, your body does strange movements that we're not even aware of, that, you're holding your shoulder up here, or
Yes.
say, you were
You're
riding on the bus.
compensating.
You're sitting in the car.
Yes.
And you're on a long drive, like you had a bit of a drive out here today. So if you're not aware, you could find yourself slumping at the wheel and driving like this. And Dr. Steinberg, good old bones, had taught me years ago to teach our patients about posture, which I still have to work on every day. And there was a really good hint. Tell me what you think about this. For me, it works personally. That if I find myself on a drive, even a 10-minute drive, that my shoulders are rounding, which I tend to do too much, and so I'll bring them back. But if I take the rear view mirror and I tilt it up just a little bit, I have to sit up straighter
Yes.
to be able to see out that mirror.
Yes.
And then if I find myself slumping again, a few days later, bring it up a little more, because rather than have to do that every few minutes, you just sit like that, and all your organs are fitting into their cavity better.
Yes, absolutely. So
Yeah.
we can actually imagine an imaginary line where we can actually create a plumb line,
Yeah,
and you can bring it where you want,
I
and
love that.
and you can lift yourself up physically, and just remember that we have certain curves in the spine, so it's a C curve going this way in the neck, and then the opposite direction for the thoracic, and then the C is similar on the neck, is similar to the lumbar. So we always want to make sure that that's not straight.
Yep.
So we want to make sure that that we're using our ergonomics and our body mechanics well. And because if you could only imagine that you would, let's say, shorten an axle on a car
Okay.
or on a piece of machinery, it would be different. The functionality. So we have a terminology in DO school where we say structure dictates function.
Okay.
So we do have to remember the structure to optimize our function.
Okay. And that's what you teach each of us that comes into your office.
Absolutely.
By doing all that.
And even just, I love reminding people that we're in front of the computer, we're in front of the TV, we have a tendency to do a lot of this. And just to open up our shoulders were designed to be more in the back part of the socket. So just bringing our shoulders back and opening up this area
Opening your heart chest.
and opening up our heart
Right.
is very, very important to do every day.
And when I do a Reiki circle, I follow the guidance. And this last Reiki circle 2 weeks ago, of course I make a plan before I go, and then Spirit tells me, no, you're not doing that today, you're doing something else. And we had about 18 people. And when I got into the room, we do it at the Buddhist Meditation Center, and I hope you could come one Sunday.
Yes.
Hope so. And there were people there, some I knew, some were brand new, but it looked like a lot of heart issues, which I could see energetically, but also you could see physically if you paid attention, because there were people sitting like this and
Exactly.
protecting your heart. And it was
Exactly.
like protecting. And it was a lot of like scrunching up, but very open, very friendly, but they didn't see themselves doing it. And it was loud and clear, even if their body language wasn't doing that. It was, you have to focus on the heart today.
Yes.
And it was so interesting. So we start with breathing, and I have people pull cards. So we used, I think it was a goddess deck, god and goddess deck, and the artwork is beautiful. I'll bring it to you when I see you in
Yes.
the office. I'll bring it to Reiki also.
Yes.
And I find that whatever card you pull has a message for you. And sometimes the message will make sense to you, but it'll make more sense to someone almost directly across from you.
Yes.
How this energy moves. So they do the breathing, and we go into a visualization. And I usually don't remember the visualization after I say it. People will say that was like I'm not that clever. It's I get out of my own way, like you get out of your way when you're working on me, and it's an amazing experience. And it was, I do remember so much. It was just breathe here, because I knew I would put some people off if I said breathe into your heart immediately if they knew I was focusing on the heart. So we took baby steps. So breathe, and just breathe naturally. See, where is your breath? And most people were pointing here. They weren't breathing further than the collarbone.
Yes.
And this is not a place where you could take people immediately into transformational breath work,
Right.
because that would be a bit much. That would be a shock. And then I said, okay, and put your hands on your belly. Feel your belly rise. And as you exhale, feel it deflate. And a lot of people breathe backwards also, which I find.
Yes.
And then when we started focusing on the heart, 4 people in the circle started to cry.
It does happen even during a treatment. It
Yes.
does happen.
You know, we talked about vulnerability, and I would tell them, your guides, your angels are with you, and it's safe to breathe into your heart. There's a book by Marianne Williamson that has a workbook in it. It's about eating disorders and weight loss, and I forget the name of the book, but I have it at home, and I'll get it for you, because I think it would help some of your patients also. And so many of us have eating disorders, and in my journey of my eating disorders, from anorexia to compulsive overeating to bulimia, et cetera, I had to educate myself to see why and where. And the beginning of the journey in Marianne Williamson's book is amazing. And I shared it at the Reiki Circle in a different perspective. I said, take a look. I wasn't going to say chapter this and this. It was just visualize, use your imagination, and see your heart. You could see it as the physical heart, or you could see it like a Valentine heart,
Yes.
wherever you're comfortable. And take a look at what barriers you have around your heart. What does the barrier look like? Does it look like a gate? Does it look like a fence? Does it look like a cement block? Does it look like a wall with bricks?
Yes.
So in Marianne Williamson's book, she asks you to visualize it as bricks that you, and we have all done it, I know I have, what you're building these bricks up of fear, anxiety, and all these bricks have different names. And then the book goes further into each of the bricks that you've been able to name. You work on that with your therapist.
Yes.
So it helps so much. And being a DO, you're working with people that have had emotional and physical and spiritual heart issues.
It's
No matter who it
completely
is.
intertwined.
No matter who it is. You're coming in for a sprained ankle.
Yes.
That they finished with physical therapy, and they're here for you.
So that was so interesting that I found fascinating about Dr. Andrew Taylor Still. He, in the early 1900s, without internet or communication with people from Eastern medicine, he had a whole concept he befriended the American Indians. He had a more spiritual approach,
Yeah.
and he was a religious. He was a missionary physician, and so it was very interesting because he is very spiritual. The work that he started with.
Yeah.
And so breaking away from MDs and putting your hands on the body
Right.
and being able to do not only physical releases but emotional releases is very fascinating.
It really is the first massage that I ever got, the first professional massage. I wept through the whole thing.
I believe it.
And then, and during that period of time, I went into therapy, and I mentioned to her, I said, I just cried. And what it did was, being with this massage therapist who I knew and trusted, she's a wonderful woman, and we're still friends all these years later, is I trusted her enough for me to be vulnerable. And when I started to cry, I was face down, she was working on the back of my heart chakra. And I started to cry, and I stopped it, and she said, oh no, you keep crying. And she just kept like, you know how a cat is kneading, and she
Yeah.
was kneading in the back of the heart area.
That's beautiful.
And it was absolutely perfect.
Yes.
You know, so when you...
As long as you don't get scared of it.
Right.
And I find I find some people, when they come for the journey of the treatment or whatever, if they can only not be afraid of the journey and
Yeah.
to see what's on the other side of the door. Because I recently was seeing somebody, and all my suggestions were, I'm afraid to do that, I'm afraid to do that, and literally using the words, I'm afraid. And calling me up and saying, I heard this, and I'm afraid. And so it's very important for me to be patient
Yeah.
and to leave that space open for people to walk through their fears that they've been holding on to for so long.
And so many fears they're not even aware of.
Agreed. Agreed. A lot of times we don't know.
No.
And I'm constantly journeying that I didn't know I was afraid and I didn't know, but it's important to just be open to it and allow it.
And enjoy the journey. There's so much to learn about ourselves and each other,
Yes.
you know, and
Forgiveness is my big thing lately.
yes.
Big,
I
even-
remember at one of my first sessions with you, it was really cute because it was something you wanted me to say, and you said, and I didn't repeat, and then we both started laughing. And I believe it was my first session with you, and it was like, I knew that we had a connection when we were doing the Zoom. And then when I came to you in person, it was even more so. I trust this woman to work on me. And then when I was able to laugh with you, it was like I could be as vulnerable as anything with you. It's so important. It's like when somebody could cry with you and laugh with you.
Yes.
It's solid. You know, when people come to me, and I believe I had said this to you in the past, that there's one gentleman that had come to me, and he just sat and wept in the chair. It's a very difficult life situation. And he sat, and I just put the tissues close by, because how we're brought up is, oh, someone's crying, you have to go comfort them. But is it neurological or something?
Paresthesias.
That if you go to touch someone, you're breaking that energy flow of them releasing and crying. And I don't want to do that. I want to be, like for myself, if I feel that something is happening and something clicks in me that I'm crying, I understand somebody's going to want to come and hug me and soothe me, but I need to cry more than I need to be hugged. I'm at the point in my healing journey
Yes.
that I know when I need the hug and I know when I need to cry.
Right.
And to learn that and to honor that it is so important,
It is.
you know. So, and to circle, what a segue into talking about medical marijuana. When I first talked to you, one of my fears, false evidence appearing real, was I was very interested in getting involved with medical marijuana to stop the inflammation and the pain from the burned nerves and from the shingles. And I was afraid that I was going to get high.
Yes, I don't want to make my patients high.
No.
And that's the whole point is medical cannabis. We have to remember it's called medical, and to remember that there are different plants. Different plants have different purposes.
Get a pen and a paper, and the show will be, repeated, but if you can, take notes on this.
So, so two basic plants. One is sativa and one is indica. Sativa is more uplifting, activating, increase energy.
Focus.
And focus. But this is a cannabis plant. We're not even talking about hemp. So
Okay.
we have the umbrella of cannabis, which can be divided or subsetted into first hemp, or which our founding fathers used with, like, if you own land, you had to grow hemp because they used it for paper, rope, clothing, and medicinal reasons.
Okay.
And so the cannabis plant, so the higher THC plant, is broken down into a basic foundational principles of sativa and indica. So
Okay.
sativa is more uplifting, activating, focus, increase energy.
Okay.
Indica is more physically relaxing. And but that's in its very basic. So it helps with physical pain, nausea, appetite. Most plants, most of the time, there's a hybrid,
Okay.
blending the two, so that you don't have too much sativa and too much indica. But it's very important to bring in the other cannabinoids. Currently, in some states more than others, we are seeing subcomponents being extracted, like CBG, CBN. But a lot of times,
CBN, that one I'm totally unfamiliar with.
CBN is in Nancy.
Okay.
So CBN is great for pain and sleep.
Okay.
If people are a little more skeptical of the THC, we can start off with CBDs and CBNs, and that is very, very helpful.
Okay.
So, but we can go to hemp sources because there are a few more hemp companies that are doing these extractions of raw extractions even. Raw extractions are 4 letters, when you see 4 letters in an extraction, so it could be CBGA or
Okay.
CBGV or THCA or THCV. So these raw extractions will have no euphoria, no high, and it's a great way to blend your medical cannabis with other subcomponents to make it a better medicine for each individual based on their problems, their
Right,
symptoms.
because my needs are very different than someone else's.
Absolutely. So most dispensaries focus on CBDs and THC, which is fine and great, but there's a bigger world to medical cannabis.
It's like going to an Italian restaurant and just ordering pizza all the time.
Yes, and if you go on to some dispensaries' websites, some dispensaries will have 80 products, some dispensaries will have 200 products. How do you go through that?
Yeah.
Some of them, some of the dispensaries I appreciate because they have a menu, and the menu will give you some feelings or activities that you're looking for.
Right.
That'll help you guide you into what you're focusing on.
Right.
But things like CBG are great for shooting pain or for focus.
Well, that's what I got the last time.
Yes.
And honestly, and to tell you all, I do not get high from any of the products that I'm
No,
using.
CBG has
And-
no high, no sleepiness, even like CBDs.
Not at all. I take it before I go to work in the morning. I can take it
Yes.
at night. and it does not impact my ability to drive or my ability to go to sleep.
Correct. Correct. It's
But
really,
it stops what the shingles did from the trigeminal nerve being burned is it impacted the nerves that go across my eye. So it burned most of the hair off the eyebrow. So when I pencil in eyebrow, there's a very strange neuropathy sensation that I
Yes.
have.
yes.
And using these products and topicals helps tremendously.
Yes, yes, I agree. And I completely agree where you can use your medical cannabis, let's say if it's in a tincture form or the liquid form, we can use it topically or orally.
I was going to ask you about that because last night I took the CBG
Yes,
and put the oil on my finger
yes,
just to see, and I put it across my eyebrow.
perfect.
And because the night before and the night before that I had to use an ice pack.
Yes,
And I just,
Absolutely.
a little dab, and I didn't have to get up at 2 in the morning and put an ice pack on.
perfect. Yes, and that's what CBG is great for, is shooting pain.
Yeah.
So I find I have patients who find THC does have some side effects like depression, or they can't wake up in the morning. It makes them too schloggy. So bringing in these other subcomponents can really make the medicine better.
Okay. So what I would neglected to tell people how to get in touch with you. Would you tell them how to get in touch with you?
Sure, you can go to my website at www.intouchhealth.net. The office number is 631-689-2846.
Thank you. And if you lose that, contact me and I'll get you in touch with her right away. So to go around again, how did you become so involved and so passionate about medical marijuana education?
Interesting. New York State, to become a prescriber, New York State offers a course.
Okay.
And it was a good course, but I didn't feel like I understood cannabis. I felt like I needed a little more in-depth training. So I asked around and I found somebody who knew about a medical cannabis conference. And this is very interesting. This conference group, they're called Patient Out of Time.
Ah.
And anybody can go to this. So if they do anything from education on social justice to legal to farming practices.
Really?
It is
Patient
fascinating.
out of time.
Patient Out of Time. And you go on, they have a cannabis conference once a year. Lynn, I can't remember Lynn's last name, but Lynn is the director. She started the program or Patient Out of Time in like the 1990s, because medical cannabis, so this is something very interesting that most people don't know, is that the federal government owns a medical cannabis crop.
No, right. I had no idea.
And it's housed, and you can Google it, at the University of Mississippi. So if you Google University of Mississippi and cannabis, they show you all the pictures of their crop.
Okay.
So there were people or doctors who would write in and say, can my patient have some cannabis for their medical illness?
Right.
And it was people with very severe illnesses.
Cancer especially, I'm sure.
Some people had bone disorders.
Yeah.
They needed multiple surgeries, like 2 surgeries a year, like very difficult stories that were even surprisingly just suffering, just completely suffering daily for the rest of their life. So a doctor would write in and say, could we have some cannabis? And it would come in a tin, and it would be pre-rolled cigarettes
Okay.
in a tin, and it has a prescription label.
Oh my
Interesting
goodness,
enough.
yeah.
and it gets shipped, believe it or not.
I believe it. I believe it. I had no idea.
Yes. So around 1990, Lynn is a nurse for oncology nurse, or she was then, and she was very upset when they closed the cannabis and they only allowed the people who were in it because we had the pharma marinol now.
Okay.
So, which is the synthetic pharma THC. It works great for appetite, but it doesn't work great for chronic pain, mental health, PTSD, things like that. So it doesn't work for everything. It works for some things, but depending on the person, it'll work well or it won't work well, just like any other medicine.
Yeah.
So she started Patient at a Time as an advocacy and educational. So that, hands down, I will recommend
Yeah.
out loud because Lynn does great work bringing people together and creating a great educational environment.
And we all need to be educated because, we
Yes.
think we know something, and people could refer to you as not a medical marijuana educator, not meaning any harm. They could say, oh, the pot lady, the pot doctor, and
Yes.
it's so far from that.
It is so far from that, but we went from recreational cannabis to converting to medical cannabis.
Yeah.
People still have fears of reefer madness
Oh,
stories.
remember that? Oh, my gosh.
So, and then the war on drugs and 3 strikes you're out, and
Yeah.
people would be put away for decades based on a couple of joints. I am personally not a pot smoker. I feel like I need to educate people about that there's more to cannabis and hemp besides from
Right.
recreational smoking, and to use it wisely and to use it as medicine. I'm not saying you can't use it recreationally.
Right.
But don't blur the lines.
Yeah, it's two completely different creatures.
It is too complete, especially when we can start adding in subcomponents of CBGA and CBGV and CBD and CBN and THCV and THCA.
And there are charts on the web that you could pull up and print out for yourself, and they
Yes.
have columns, for anxiety, depression, shooting pain,
Yes.
neuropathy. So pull up one of these, maybe even, I don't know if the Mayo Clinic would have a chart, but something valid, and take a look at what your issues are, and take a look and go down the list and speak to your doctor and see if you can get a reference to Dr. Varlotta or someone like Dr. Varlotta.
Yes.
That before you get that medical marijuana card, you have to go through an education process.
I agree. And
you
I
would-
can
you
only...
were not just going to give me my card.
No.
You had to educate me.
Yes. So anybody who wants their medical cannabis card from me, we have to have an hour and a half conversation.
Oh, yes.
This is not a quick and go.
No.
And then it needs
And
to
it
be...
shouldn't be. It
and-
shouldn't be a quick and go.
People
And when
get-
I went into the dispensary that I used, they were always available, but initially you sat with a pharmacist
Yes.
for close to an hour, and they went over your paperwork for what my needs were. They talked to me about differences. It was a lot of what you had already educated me on, because you need to have it reinforced because it's really new information. So to have that
Yes.
information reinforced, and any time that I went in there for topical or oral or whatever it was, do you want to meet with the pharmacist today?
Yes.
And they never made you feel put out. They were welcoming, and you felt very safe and taken care of there.
Absolutely. And that's one thing that when you go to a cannabis dispensary, most of the time you'll see people over 65.
It was rare that I saw someone younger than me.
Yes.
Rare.
And
Walkers, crutches.
yes.
You could see people like they've been through hell and back, it looked like, having a hard time.
And people will say, oh, not in my backyard. I don't want a dispensary in my backyard. And it is further from the truth,
Yeah.
the needs of people who have seizures, who have really horrible chronic issues that need the support of medical cannabis.
Yeah. You know, and like don't blur the lines, which
No.
people tend to do because this is still, I guess, new. It's still considered new.
We're evolving and
Thank
re-educating. And I just hope more people understand how important this is. And especially our veterans. Our veterans come back, they go to the VA, and they end up getting opioids.
Yeah.
And I don't see, they'll get an antidepressant, anxiolytic, and opioids. But really, and plus they'll give them therapy and other things.
Right.
But I really find that cannabis works way better than opioids.
And going into the opioid crisis, going into pharmaceuticals, I think it gets into that horrible political thing that it's all about the money and not the person, the patient, and their needs.
Right.
And there's a place out here, it used to be, we used to have the North Shore Horse Rescue, which did a lot of wonderful healing work with veterans. And Louise Abbott-Ball, who's coming back to New York, who I want you to meet, she is a therapist, and she had a contract with Stony Brook, the Veterans Hospital.
Yes.
And we worked with the veterans and for PTSD, et cetera, and the horses that had been abused that also had PTSD. And it was so fascinating, Dr. Varlotta, because we had this beautiful piece of land in Baiting Hollow, and the veterans would come and I would do my frame drum and we'd get into a meditation and we'd be sitting when it was nice, we'd be outside out of the barn. And the horses let you know which horse wanted to come in and participate. Not all of them did. And without fail, the horses which would match up to a person that had a similar story. Wow. And there is a short film, and I will have to put it on the Facebook page for Phoenix Rising, about the horse rescue and the veterans. And this one veteran had talked, he had certain issues, and he was suffering tremendously. And there he is at North Shore Horse Rescue, and this horse had been abused in a similar way to this young veteran. He sat there, he was on the Hail Bay in the middle of the circle, and this one horse came up to him and spent her time with him. And he said he felt such a connection with this animal. When they had asked me to participate in these circles, I was blown away. This is why I know that you're going to want to, in your free time, to get involved. The first time I was there with the veterans and the horses was a rainy day, and it was in remembrance of those we lost in 2001. And I'm in the barn, and the girls are putting out coffee and bagels and things for the veterans, and everyone's arriving, and the barn was open on both sides. And most of the horses were in their place. One horse, black, was outside playing in the field. Just like out of magic, shiny, beautiful black coat, beautiful, beautiful being. And Laurel, who lived at the farm, was sitting in the back on a tack box, and I walked over and I said, "Are you okay?" And she said, I don't feel good. I really don't feel good. I have to get through this. I said, "It's okay." I said, "I'll direct Reiki to you too. We're going to do some drumming on the frame drum." And there was a cat.
My apologies.
Don't worry about it. It sounds lovely. It's a harp. So,
Yes.
But you know what?
The angels.
It's angels are coming in. And it's funny that it's a harp because I'm going to talk about a beautiful being, Simba, that crossed over. Maybe it's Simba that came through. And at the farm, there was a dusty orange kitty who didn't have a typical domestic cat face. He had a very lion-type face, very muted orange. And he came around the bend into where Laurel was sitting on the tack box. And I looked at him and I adored him. And the other cat that lived up in the rafters, this long-haired black and white Maine Coon. And I said, Simba, come help me work on Laurel. And I had my hands by her chest doing Reiki. And people saw this, otherwise we never would have believed it. Simba looked up, almost like, okay, side eye, walked behind Laurel, stood behind her on the tack box, and put one paw on each of her shoulder blades.
I believe it.
And just stood there until I finished on my end. So the horses are, the animals are amazing, and they're being tuned into you. I had gone through a traumatic incident in October of 2019. And Louise, the therapist, some reason she called the house intuition-wise, and I was less than 2 minutes by car to get there. And she said to the two friends that were with me, Lindsay's wife, Diane, bring her over here. So I went over, and being a city girl, I was not used to being that close to horses. I've ridden, but not face-to-face and being there. And there was this horse, Dan, and she had him tethered, and she was working with a magnet on him. He had been beaten horribly by an owner. So she was, and he was still like, you knew when that magnet went over a painful spot. And one of the volunteers comes in, and she said, oh, he's doing great today. He hasn't bitten anyone. And I'm like, okay, let me back up a little bit. And I looked at her, I said, she says, yeah, yesterday he bit me on my neck. And I'm like, why did she bring us here? You know, and I'm already in a traumatic situation, and now she's telling me this horse bites, and he's gorgeous, and he's huge. And Louise unhooks everything, and just, the three of you come with me, went out with her to the paddock, and there's a bench right outside, and I figure we're going to sit there and watch her, and it's just beautiful being there. And there's a horse named Phoenix there, too.
Nice.
So that I've done long-distance healing on. What a connection. And she said, oh, no, Phoenix, you come with me. And I'm like, and I was so broken that day, I just, whatever she said, and I trust her like I trust you with my heart. She sits me on a big bale of hay, I sit, and she takes all the leads off of Dan. And I'm like, he's going to bite me. And I'm just like, whatever, you know. And she said, close your eyes and breathe. I close my eyes, and the next thing I know, my body can't do this normally. I am bent over in half like a hinge at my hips. I am in half, and I was 60 pounds heavier then. Very hard to bend over this tummy. And the next thing I knew, I was in a very different place. I was not in my body. And I hear the girls talking. I hear Louise talking. She's coming back. And this arm was up in the air. And when I opened my eyes, my arm was in Dan's mouth. He ever so gently lifted my arm with a little bit of pressure because my son David was on the phone with information about our family situation.
Yes.
So he had communication that my son was calling, that I needed to be awake, but what they told me, what he had done while I was out, before I fell over, he had his forehead against my heart chakra. And when I went forward, he had his forehead against the back of my heart chakra, and he stayed there for over an hour.
Oh.
I was out for about an hour and a half, they said. So the animal connection,
Yes.
to be, you know, and it does tie in with medical marijuana, because there are so many things we could do to be healed and to heal each other,
Yes.
and to share with each other that are not pharmaceutical.
Yes.
You know, like you have those 3 muffins in your house.
Yes.
And when I first got to her office, the very first day, of course, you're going to a new doctor, you're a little apprehensive what's going to happen, and these 3 faces greet you at the door. You can't be apprehensive.
They
with
love
them.
it. They love it. They look forward to it.
When people come in, they're your little healing greeters.
Yes, I agree. When we had COVID, they were very depressed.
Because no one was coming. It was all on Zoom.
Yes, they were very lonely.
Yeah.
and they missed everybody coming over.
Yeah. And you have some very special patients coming in there
Yes.
that I know adore them all.
Yes.
And each one has such a unique personality. When you sent me the video the other day, she could be in a conference on the computer, and when they want mommy time, they want mommy time.
Yeah.
Yes. And I love how you communicate with them.
Yes, they're toddlers.
Yeah.
So they're allowed to misbehave up
Yes.
to a certain level,
Mhm.
but then I need good manners.
Yes. And she does tell them that.
Yes.
And they do listen eventually.
Eventually.
Eventually they do listen. So believe it or not, we only have about 6 minutes left. So I told you it was going to go fast. So any information or words of wisdom that you want to share with anyone, with the group before
No,
we tie it up?
I think we covered it, just that I just would love for people to look beyond CBDs and THC for their medical cannabis pharmacy.
Right.
And there's just so much bigger to this world. And especially the raw extractions, that's really new. People are starting to do raw extractions, which is, people out in Colorado and California have been doing raw
Right.
extractions, but New York, we don't really have that yet. And I'm really looking forward to it because some of them help with mental health issues or
Yeah.
stress or worry, and just some of our everyday issues could just go a lot better if, just like you're eating your leafy greens or something, or your fruits or vegetables,
Yeah.
bringing in raw cannabis is actually very nutritious. And
See, I didn't know that either.
people in other states who have more access to cannabis plants, they like juicing the leaves or juicing the stem and stalks.
Okay.
And I would love to see more of that. But
And maybe the dispensaries could have, how they have juice bars like in Wild by Nature and Trader Joe's and things like that,
Yeah.
to have a juice bar
yes.
at a dispensary.
But again, that would be, yes, that would be awesome, because right now, the way they're doing it, of course, I don't know the whole scientific process, but it's like they're juicing it, and then they're making an extraction
Right.
of the raw extraction, the 4-letter extraction.
Okay.
So it would be great, like New York State, we're allowed, I think, 3 mature plants, 3 immature plants, but some people literally grow for themselves. They're
Yeah.
not gonna start juicing it, because for juicing, you need to juice
You need
every
more of a
day.
quantity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You need more, a lot more.
A lot more. Yes, you need a couple of fields
Yes.
growing there.
So
Yeah.
that would be great. I would love it, because I do personally love juicing.
Yeah.
I think it's a great thing to do. But we just don't have access for that
No.
yet.
And for today, to get you all this information, it helps so much for all of us to realize there are so many things we could do that are not pharmaceutical related.
Yes. But I also never want to discount standard medicine.
No,
I love integrating standard
Yes.
medicine and blending it with holistic or herbal or homeopathy
Right.
or different
The
types of
integrating
body
of it
work.
works so beautifully.
Yes.
My issue was always when a physician would say to you, no, it has to be a pharmaceutical, and they wouldn't even be open to discussing something natural,
Yes.
you know.
Well, that's what this office is for.
Yes.
This office is for having that further discussion of the plan, the bigger box
Right.
of your plan,
Right.
Phoenix, or somebody else's plan, which would not be your plan.
Not at all. And how interesting that a traditional neurologist, who is wonderful, Dr. Romano, said, I want you to get in touch with Dr. Varlotta.
Yes.
Because what he didn't want to prescribe them, but it was the only way he knew to deal with the pain, well, with anti-seizure medications, gabapentin and the others.
Yes, those will really make you sleep a lot and forget a lot.
And gabapentin impacted my speech and my eye-hand coordination.
Yes,
And it's a good thing I was home for 2 weeks because of the pain, but
you can't function. So people who want quality of life with their chronic issues, some of these medicines are not,
they're not going to help you be functional.
no, you're not going to be able to enjoy life.
Okay, so your phone number and your web page one more time.
Website is www.intouchhealth.net, and the office number is 631-689-2846.
I thank you so much for being
Oh,
here today.
thank you
It's been
so much,
amazing.
too.
Thank
This
you.
was great,
This is
so much fun.
awesome. So for the last 2 minutes, I'm going to ask everyone to just sit back, close your eyes, take a nice deep breath in, and just feel your breath. Feel the quiet gently embracing you. Breathe into your lungs, exhale. Breathe in peace, light, and love. Exhale anything and everything that does not serve your highest good. Again, inhale peace, light, love. Exhale. And now feel the quiet around you. You might even feel the presence of a guardian angel, a spirit guide. And I wish you a beautiful, blessed day. Do an anonymous good deed today. And I thank you all for being around and supporting the show. And if you'd like to get in touch with me, you know how to find me. Phoenix Rising, Sunday Reiki with Phoenix and Friends, or Sacred Feather Healing Arts. And I'd like to thank everyone at LTV, the guys and gals, and everyone in the production booth and everywhere. You're all always amazing to me. And thank you to my guests and Dr. Lynda Varlotta. You are amazing, and I thank you so much for being a part of my life.
Oh.
You've helped me tremendously.
My pleasure.
She's the best. You've got to get a hold of her. So thank you again.
Thank you.
And we're going to go to some really wonderful music and see that beautiful Phoenix on the screen soon. And make it a wonderful day for yourself. Thank you again so much. Bye now.